You're listening to Cards to the Moon, a podcast about trading cards from both a collector and investor perspective. We hope you'll stick around for the ride as we take a deep dive into the state of the hobby, share some hot takes, hopefully some useful advice, and fun stories along the way. Hey guys, welcome back to Cards to the Moon. This is episode 156, and my name is Clark from 5Card Guys on Instagram and YouTube, as well as 5cardguys.com. Now, my co-hosts Hyung and John are away for this episode, but not to worry. I was able to get a special guest for this episode, and his name is Mac Gambill, a fellow hobby content creator and a collector, of course. We talked 90s basketball cards, soccer cards even, and just how having more diverse hobby content is actually a great sign for the hobby. So we'll play that interview in just a minute, but off the top, I just want to talk about that LeBron James and Mookie Betts Topps Now card, where they were both saluting each other at a recent Dodgers game. I don't know if you saw it, but LeBron took his cap off to Mookie after he hit a couple of homers in the game, and Mookie returned the salute to the basketball icon. Now, if you're not familiar with Topps Now, it's kind of a print-on-demand card where you can pre-order a Topps Now card, which is usually available on sale for just 24 hours. And I believe for this card, more than 32,000 people ordered the LeBron and Mookie card, which was on sale for $9.99 each, or I think you could also get it for $80 if you buy 20 at a time. We talked about Topps Now cards on this pod before, and generally speaking, we're not huge fans of it. Seems like it's a cheap paper product, and the whole print-on-demand, short-term availability, it's a bit gimmicky to me personally anyway. Now, there's exceptions, of course, like that Ellie De La Cruz Topps Now card after he stole 3 bases in one game. And some of the special numbered cards had relic patches of the bases from that game. Those cards cost a lot more, of course, but you know, it was pretty cool and it was pretty creative. But the ones that cost $10, you're just getting the base picture cards. That being said, going back to the LeBron Mookie card, the reason this made hobby news was because it was the first time LeBron has been on a Topps card since 2009, which is 14 years ago, when Topps, I believe, last had the NBA license. Now, one detail I didn't mention is that LeBron isn't wearing an NBA uniform. He's actually in Dodgers apparel, which I guess gets around the issue of Topps/Fanatics not having the NBA license yet. In addition to this, I made an IG reel on my 5Card Guys Instagram page saying that wouldn't it be cool if both Mookie and LeBron signed this Topps Now card? Kind of like how Trout and Ohtani did for their WBC Topps Now card, which made big hobby news just a couple weeks ago. Now, one person commented on that reel, and he rightly mentioned that LeBron couldn't sign it even if he wanted to because he has a long-standing exclusive deal with Upper Deck for his autographs. But there's been speculation that LeBron might have gotten out of that deal and might actually have one with Topps. And the speculation comes from some collectors noticing, like Eric the Collectibles Guru, who mentioned that in the last couple of months, Upper Deck removed LeBron's picture from its exclusive athletes page on its website. So, does that mean an exclusive deal with Topps will be imminently announced by LeBron? That's the question. We'll have to wait and see. But if it is true, once Topps/Fanatics gets the NBA license in a few years, we can once again expect to see a LeBron James Topps NBA autograph card in future sets, which will be super cool. Okay, that's all I got for off the top. Actually, one more thing. Right after the interview with Mac, I'll have a quiz show segment for you guys. And I've done this segment in the past with Hyung and John, but for this episode, I'm going to ask you, the listeners, some of the questions, and I'll have a prize for one lucky listener who answers the most correctly. Okay? There's a couple of other rules, but I'll go over that after the interview. Okay, with that, here is the interview I had with Mac Gambill, aka Mac underscored card collection on IG. All right, today we have another special guest on the pod. If you're on Instagram, you might have seen some of his live streams and IG reels like I have and enjoyed his humorous videos on a wide number of hobby topics. His name is Mac Gambill and his IG handle is Mac underscored card collection. So definitely give him a follow. And once you follow him, you'll see he's also a 90s basketball card collector as well as a soccer card collector, which I'll ask him about in a bit. But just like our past several guests on the pod who have been great content creators for the hobby, I really want to highlight Mac's contributions and get to know him a bit better. So without further ado, Mac, welcome to the pod.
Hey, appreciate it, Clark. Thanks a lot, man.
Yeah, always great to connect with other hobby content creators.
Yeah. I'll try not to be super embarrassing. So.
Oh, no worries about that. Well, I always like to start from the beginning of everyone's hobby journey. So if you don't mind, can you share with us when you started collecting and how you got to doing what you're doing now in the hobby?
Yeah, it's funny because I think a lot of people have similar stories. You know, we collected in the 90s, then, you know, we grew up, got cars, went to college, stuff like that, and we kind of get out of it for a little bit. And so I was big into it in the 90s because my buddy I think someone was giving him cards and he kind of introduced it to me, and it was mostly basketball at that time. And even though I played soccer all growing up, for some reason, basketball cards were big in my little social circle back in the 90s. So fast forward, you know, I had stuff in the closets like everyone else did, you kind of forget about. And during COVID, I kind of had a similar story where, you know, life happens. I tend to find a lot of people that get back into the hobby, get into it as a bit of an outlet. And same thing for me. I was going through a tough year or two in my career. I had a relationship that was kind of crumbling at the time. And I think I happened to rediscover cards at a really interesting time for me. And especially where cards were at that point. Because in the 90s, you know, we all have memories of sitting around with Beckett magazines and not really knowing what our cards were worth. I have to admit, a lot of kids I talked to, like, maybe had a $5 or $10 card, but nothing that was really that valuable. And I think where it was, you know, a few years ago, I kind of opened my eyes to, wow, we actually know what things are worth. It's easier to transact. We can find things we actually want. In the cool cards that I could never afford when I was 8 years old, now I can, for better or worse, just go buy. And so for me, I have a little bit of addictive personality where, like, for me, it was just like, it ticked all the boxes. And I played college soccer. That's partially why soccer cards are interesting to me too.
Gotcha.
So it, like, combines the whole idea of kind of some of my career focus with love for sports and then just being kind of a 90s geek. So now I'm, as you can see now, I'm kind of, you know, dove in head first, and for better or worse, I am where I am now.
Nice. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I always ask this question, and you definitely see a trend. Our stories are very similar and aligned.
I listened to one of your episodes yesterday as I was driving, and I can't remember who was talking. I was like, oh man, all of us are going to have the exact same story getting back into the hobby.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. We're all from a specific generation of card collectors for sure. Like I said off the top, I've been enjoying getting in touch with different content creators. And in a previous episode of our podcast, one of my co-hosts actually mentioned this, but we talked that one sign that we know the hobby is growing in general is when you have more diverse content put out there by different content creators. And early on, it was your straightforward, here's the hobby news, here are the hobby issues, and we talk about it like it's a newscast almost. And then you got the talk radio style, kind of like this podcast with a couple of friends I do it with on a weekly basis. But I think now we're seeing more collectors with personality who bring humor and levity into the space, which is something that's been great to see. And I say you're a big part of that, Mac. And so I was wondering, how'd you come up with the idea that, these are the kind of videos I like to make and put out there in the hobby?
That's a great question. And I think you're right. I think there has been like an evolution of kind of content. And I think for me, it's a little bit of you're kind of a product of your environment. And, you know, I spend a lot of time with Stock. As I mentioned, he and I have that kind of Monday Instagram live show. Yeah. And he creates that type of content. The difference is I'm a little bit socially awkward. I know I'm on a podcast right now, so you probably don't pick up on it quite as much, but sometimes things that come out of my mouth don't totally make sense. So I figured out for me, I'm kind of just a big goofy dude, and it's a lot easier for me to be on screen and do more of kind of a kind of more like silent film type content where it's using facial expressions, quirky subtitles, and music. Yeah. And I tend to find it's a bit of a niche I hadn't really found other people doing that type of content in.
Sure.
And we have to be able to make fun of ourselves. I mean, we have to. I mean, our hobby is
Absolutely.
I mean, we are so ridiculous. We sit around looking at pieces of paper, and for the outside party, like, we're so weird. And like, my fiance was asking me about the card shows I go to regularly, and she's like, "Wait, what are these card shows like?" And I'm like, "We're not cool people. Like, we're just a bunch of geeks sitting in a room looking at cardboard." So I think we have to be able to make fun of ourselves and the things that go on in our hobby, because I think, especially right now, the news that's happening, I mean, week to week, it's exhausting. I mean, you probably saw one of those videos put together last week where I was just, by Friday, I was like, I can't handle any more hobby news right now. And I think most of us kind of feel that way sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny that you say when you're telling your fiance about what it's like at these shows. Rob Gerard, we had the sports card therapist on a couple of weeks ago, and he was saying something similar. It's like, we're just not cool. But but I pushed back a little in that episode. I'm like, I have two young boys. I'm like, I feel like we're trying our best to make it cool for the next generation.
Yes.
Make it more widely accepted that I think card collecting is a thing.
As the hobby grows and there's more people collecting,
right,
we like our pool of being cool gets bigger. So there's one of those things like right now I think the hobby does continue to grow. And I think to a lot of kids now, it's amazing to see when you go in card shops, the number of kids that are in there. And I think, this convergence, and that kind of probably gets to a little bit where you want to go. But yeah, I mean, the fact that kids think it's cool, I feel like we're going in the right direction.
I agree 100%. Well, I know you mentioned off air before that you're on the road at the moment, and I saw your content while you were at the National just a few weeks ago, last month. Did you ever think early on when you started creating hobby content that you'd be traveling to different places outside of your home state to make hobby content?
Well, let's just start let's look at my Instagram handle. It's Mac_card collection, which has like zero creativity to it. So no, I literally started this account about 18 months ago of like, oh yeah, like, it would be nice to save some money on eBay fees. And it just started with me taking pictures, and exactly to your point, like it creates like this whole monster as you kind of get deeper into it. So no, I absolutely had no idea. And I think it just gets to little kind of happenstance kind of interactions you have with people that lead to meeting new people, getting into more conversations, and kind of all of a sudden I have this regular Instagram live show I do with stock, and then now I start having guests on my Instagram probably once a week, and I do ripping for some other people. And I think it's to the point now I just realize like I'm kind of goofy and I enjoy making Instagram videos. So no, and I think the National was even more eye-opening to me of, wow, I was interacting with a lot of other content creators and realizing, wow, I'm kind of slowly kind of getting into that world more and more, and really enjoy it. I mean, I think that's one of the beautiful things of the hobbies. You can really consume it any way you want. You can do it in more of like a solo manner where it's just kind of you sitting in a room going through binders, or you can be a weird guy on Instagram like I am. So it's one of those things where you can kind of enjoy it however you want. And if you probably heard about people at the National, there were so many different walks of life there, so many people enjoying it in different ways. And you could see there were some people there who had probably been there for decades, handling the show in a very similar way with their spreadsheets, going through looking for very specific things. And then there's people with camera crews around them, and it's you talk about that dichotomy, but it's neat to see you can have both those types of individuals enjoy something like the National and enjoy cards in general.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you there too. And every once in a while people like what they like to see, and then they have they comment on other things that they don't like to see. But I think it's a strength of the hobby to have, like I said earlier, this diverse kind of content out there by different content creators. I think that'll only grow the space. So love seeing your content out there. Very different from what we do. I'm not as comedic or in any way like that.
You're much more well spoken than I am, so that's why pick your poison. We all have something.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to what you said. Like you're a product of your environment and how you grew up, and if listeners of the show will know, like I have a background in journalism, so maybe that just lends itself to more straightforward interviewing, but going in a little bit more in depth, and which is what I like for sure. Okay, you know what? I want to kind of pivot and ask you about your card collection, like what you collect, and like we mentioned, 90s basketball cards is one of them, and we know that was during the junk wax era. We kind of grew up in that as kids. So you kind of mentioned it already, but is there a specific reason why you gravitated towards basketball cards of that era? Was it really just your friends introduced you to it, and were you a huge basketball fan as well?
Yeah, it's funny because like I played basketball a little bit growing up, and I have gotten to be more of a fan now. But it's funny, like I think the 90s NBA had one of the most what's the best way to put this? I don't think we will ever see the personalities in a sports era like we did in 90s NBA. I think between Jordan, Shaq, Kobe, Iverson, and class of 96, they were kind of a cultural phenomenon, and they bled into movies, video games. I mean, they were everywhere, and I just don't know if we'll ever see that again.
Yeah.
And it may just be of how kind of where we were with kind of technology and media at the time, just kind of all of that hitting at the same time. So,
right.
And it also too, like I said, when I was that age and I'd go into a card shop, I maybe had a $10 card. I mean, the thing that really I think opened my eyes was getting I have both a Shaquille O'Neal and a Michael Jordan 1992 Beam Team members only cards.
Nice.
To me, that was kind of the step of really that realization of, wow, like I can now get into cards that are really unique, things that like growing up I always knew about but didn't think I'd ever get because I was really
right.
There wasn't eBay. We didn't have things like that growing up.
Yeah.
Never came across that card but knew of it from Beckett magazines. And I think as I got back into the hobby, that was such a natural place to gravitate back towards because that's kind of the nostalgia. It's back to the childhood, that we all kind of look for. And then what's essentially happened is I have my 90s NBA PC. Well, I can't rip 90s NBA packs as frequently. And sometimes if I do find them, they're super expensive. So for me, I played soccer all growing up, played college soccer. And for me, if I'm going to rip something, I want to rip something I kind of know. And that's a world I still am a huge soccer fan. So I have these really two very separate buckets, 90s NBA and then ultra modern soccer, which I feel like are completely different. But so that's a lot of these newer stuff I'll rip, or I even collect some players or have a team. Will be more ultra modern soccer. So it's kind of a very, very two different kind of two-legged thing there.
Yeah. You kind of answered my next question, but before I ask you about your soccer cards specifically, going back to basketball, I agree with you. Like the 90s basketball, you had these strong personalities, the guys you mentioned, Shaq, Kobe, Jordan, of course, and even talking with Cajun Cardboard. He's a big Jordan collector, and it seems like anyone that collected or grew up in the 90s NBA era had like an affinity towards one player because it's that's your guy. Did you have a guy like that when you were watching basketball?
It's funny because I collect about 5 players from the 90s, but there's one. So this is kind of funny. My mom just dropped off stuff as she's like cleaning her house, and one of it was like something from when I was in 3rd grade. I was like, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Keep in mind, I played soccer all growing up. That was my sport.
Yeah.
Somewhere in 3rd grade, when someone asked what I want to be when I grow up, I said I wanted to play for the Orlando Magic. So that just shows you how the era of Shaq and Penny. So Penny is one of the big guys I collect.
Hardaway,
that to me just represented what was happening in the 90s. I didn't even really play that sport much other than kind of at recess. Right. But to me, that was like the coolest, the Orlando Magic in the 90s. Same, you could put the Bulls up there too, but just, that was kind of the cultural phenomenon. So I'd say Anthony Hardaway and probably Iverson, the two big ones I'm collecting right now.
Oh, nice. Cool. Yeah. I had this question about soccer cards, and I was wondering how you got into it, but you kind of mentioned that you grew up playing soccer and all the way up to the college level. Is that right?
I played a little bit afterwards.
Okay.
But through college, and it was one of those things where it's just a world I know because I've played it for so long. And so it's one of those things where I actually didn't even really collect soccer cards when I got back into the hobby because I wasn't totally sure the hobby was didn't quite know what to do with it. Maybe is a good way to put it. I think a lot of people had loaded up for the World Cup and maybe didn't quite get the returns they thought they were going to get. So I feel like it was kind of a stigma around soccer cards when I first got back in.
Yeah.
And I think what's happened though is as we've had these price corrections, I think soccer is actually some of the best price wax you can buy at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think it has some of the most upside. So you obviously have one of the largest fan bases on the planet. And I think it's just taken a while for it to really kind of materialize in the way that it maybe has in other sports. Keep in mind, a lot of soccer memorabilia has been around stickers, which is a little bit of a different concept.
Sure.
Very similar to cards in a lot of ways, but that's kind of where the soccer card market kind of started. And so I think that's been a little bit unique. A lot of people outside the U.S. still are big into the stickers.
Right.
But ultimately, I think what's happened, at least I've noticed over the past year, is eBay has made it easier to sell to international buyers.
Sure.
I realized a lot of the soccer cards I actually sell, I've noticed on the addresses, are going through services like Ship My Cards and others to international buyers. So it seems like we're starting to
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of converge maybe in the right way.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you because, we're both living in North America, and obviously soccer, you could argue that's the fourth or fifth most popular sport in terms of at the pro level, behind basketball, football, baseball, and then you can make an argument for hockey. Well, in Canada, hockey's number one, so different orders.
Hockey's a great game too. I just didn't grow up like in a hockey place, but it's a great game.
Yeah, it's more cultural here. I never skated at all as a kid, but
I'm amazed you ducked that somehow.
I was funny enough, I was more into baseball for some reason. Maybe it's the success of the Blue Jays in the early 90s, right? That influenced me.
You're a baseball town too. That makes sense. I can get
that. Absolutely. But with soccer, like I always wonder, like what the soccer card market is in North America, in the U.S. for you, and you kind of touched upon it. But do you think there's more education that needs to be involved in terms of like people really getting into soccer cards as they have been with the other major sports? And do you think like someone like Messi coming to Miami will help with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it starts with awareness, and I think having stars come over here definitely helps generate more interest because our domestic league starts getting better.
Yeah,
I think a lot of where the difficulty comes, I was thinking about it, just had a conversation with somebody the other day. A lot of it comes to the feeder system in the U.S. is so much different to how it is in soccer. In the U.S. we have people go to college, and then it's all over ESPN, and we know who the top stars are, and it's very kind of centralized. I'll use Europe as an example. You've got domestic leagues for every country, and then you've got multiple tiers within every country. So it's a little bit harder to keep track of who the good players are coming up as they're younger through the academy system. And so I think it's also created some confusion. A good example, the top league in England is the Premier League. The second tier is the Championship, which confuses the heck out of people. And then if the best teams in the Premier League qualify for the Champions League. Now, it's a bit of a branding situation here, and I just had to explain it to someone the other day. That's why it's fresh. And I think, unfortunately, it does just take some education on kind of how it's all structured, which for the average person who didn't grow up playing soccer, it's just a little bit removed. And I think, unfortunately, that's a bit of the problem.
Yeah. No, I hope soccer cards become a bigger thing for sure. But, going to local card shows, like, have you seen more presence of soccer cards? Because besides the last World Cup, when we went to card shows here in Toronto, there are a few vendors that do sell soccer cards, and now it's more of the higher end, like the Ronaldos, the Messi. You see those cards in cases, but not so much the more ultra modern prison, like probably the ones you rip these days.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think if we looked at the National, for instance, National was kind of interesting because there was a joke that everyone had a Trevor Lawrence auto. That was kind of like every table had that kind of card there.
Yeah.
I think anyone that had something like soccer, it was generally going to be a Ronaldo, a Messi, or in Holland.
Yeah.
And I think when you look at even local card shows, it's probably pretty similar as I think about it. Sometimes I think at the National I saw a couple tables that were kind of leaning more soccer and had some unique stuff, but for the most part, it seems like we're kind of going through this generational shift right now in soccer where Messi and Ronaldo are getting to the tail ends of their career.
Sure.
Mbappe and Haaland are kind of taking over. But you got to remember, Haaland's already had his big transfer, and then Mbappe is kind of in this weird point with his club situation.
Yeah.
And so I think that's maybe stalled it a little bit. But, the leagues are getting started again right now. And I think what's going to happen as we have the World Cup come back to the U.S., I just would have to think that's going to be a significant tipping point. And like I said, soccer cards in general are kind of some of the lowest price point wise right now. So they probably have the highest upside, in my opinion, in terms of how much movement they can have. Obviously we're not in it just for the money, of course, but it's one of those things that if you are thinking about buying something that is going to hold value, yeah. I at this point, I personally think soccer has a lot of potential. I'm not trying to pump soccer. I'm a big soccer fan. That's why I say that.
Yeah, for sure. That being said, I really want to rip some soccer cards now.
Well, here's one recommendation I would say for anyone that does want to rip soccer, and this is where it is unique, is there are boxes specifically for UEFA Champions League or the UEFA club competition. And what you have in those boxes is essentially the players from the best teams in Europe. And there's really not a product like that in the US that I know of, at least, that is just the star players across all the teams of the league. So meaning that even the base cards you're pulling are still big names. Nice. And so that's what I was ripping a lot of over the past 6 months, has been more kind of UEFA Champions League or club competition products, because they're all, for the most part, big players or big upcoming rookies.
Yeah, that'll be more fun to rip, because you'll probably recognize these guys.
But rip what you know, rip what you enjoy. I opened a box one time of the Bowman college football product about a year ago.
Yeah,
it was probably the most underwhelming rip, not because anything negative about the product. I just realized as I was going through it, man, I really don't know that many people in here, and it just takes away from the whole thing, because we're fans first. So
agreed. All right, well, thanks for that info. And like I mentioned, we always like to end off our interviews with some rapid fire questions, but you could take as long as you want with these questions. It's not rapid fire answers, it's rapid fire questions. So yeah, don't feel rushed to answer any of these, but I always start off with the easy one. What's your favorite PC card at the moment, and why?
Easy. So I don't know if you saw the post on my Instagram. It's one of the pinned ones. When I was at the National, I found one of my Grail cards. It was the Anthony Hardaway Flair Showcase Ticket to Net.
Yeah.
And the story behind it, which I won't get into the whole thing, but long story short, I only had that number of dollars left in my pocket that I basically negotiated for it. And then I ended up getting to meet 5 minutes later one of the lady who was one of the designers of the card when she used to be at Flair. So it all happened in a 5 minute period. And I got a picture with her with the card.
Amazing.
I'll never be able to sell that card ever. So just the history and the story behind that one card.
That's a cool one for sure. Well, that was one of your Grail cards. Do you have any other Grail cards that you're hoping to have one day?
So the Flair Showcase Ticket to Net is probably one of my favorite insert sets, and I realistically would like to pick up the Iverson and Kobe and Shaq and all that. So
that's a cool one too. Nice.
Yeah. So one day, it'll take me a while, but
the chase is part of the fun too, right? Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I want you to rate the following hobby news in terms of shock value or shock level from a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the least shocking and 10 being the most, because as we kind of briefly mentioned, lots been going on in the hobby, right? So here's the first one. Panini suing Fanatics.
So in terms of shock value, I'm going to give the shock value a 4 on that one.
Okay.
I think a lot of people saw that one coming. I think people saw that coming.
I agree. 2, well, the other side, Fanatics counter-suing Panini.
That one was more surprising to me. I think I should have probably expected it, but some of the things that I don't know if you read the articles around of what they accused.
Yeah.
I'm going to say a 7 for that one, because that was some pretty incredible things they dropped in that news article.
Yeah, that was good gossip hobby news there. All right. 3, the NFLPA dropping Panini 3 years earlier.
That was high up there, and I think for multiple reasons. I think I'm going to say 8 on that one. I feel like I don't know if I'll ever give anything a straight 10, but maybe 8.5. I think everyone was so surprised in how abrupt it was. It didn't have to happen, the week it did. And I think now with the releases of the football products coming up so quickly, I don't know really where that puts us in terms of what football product comes out.
Big question. And with the possibly the arbitration case coming out, we'll see how what results out of that. So yeah. Okay, a couple more. PSA 5, that PSA 5 card crossing over to Beckett 10 controversy.
So I realized the hard way a few weeks ago when I posted something that there are basically 2 rival gangs in card cleaning. It's there's very distinct. It's basically like asking people what political party. It was kind of incredible. And I think knowing the types of products we have on the market, to be able to cross over and get a better grade, not surprised about. But from a 5 to a 10 is ridiculous, in my opinion. I mean, a 5 should be nearly bent in half. And
right.
Something's going on, and I don't know enough to know what it is, but that's this. I think they then posted another card about a couple days later, backyard.
Yeah. Something's
going on. I just don't know what it is, but something's going on.
Yep, something to keep an eye out on. And lastly, speaking of hobby personalities, Brian Gray out as Leaf CEO. That came, I guess, a couple days ago.
Yeah, that was the tipping point on Friday where I was like, I can't handle any more hobby news.
No.
Yeah. I was surprised. That was one of the more surprising. However, I heard from some of my friends that there had been rumors he was maybe going to another company. So I don't know whether or not that is the case, or we're going to see an announcement.
Right.
But I was taken back by that one. And maybe it was also just the timing of it with everything else that was going on, that it just kind of seemed like we were in a twilight zone. But that one I'd put up there too, from my perspective, around a 7 or an 8, because I wasn't expecting that one, especially with everything else going on.
Yeah, but he's one of those guys you think he's just going to be in the hobby as Leaf CEO forever, right?
Well, that's why it was kind of like Jeff Bezos leaving Amazon. Kind of
exactly. You just don't expect it. Yeah.
I will say though, I am starting to get more intrigued with Leaf product. Different episode, but I think Leaf is as we're seeing kind of a watered down of patches across the industry. I think some of Leaf's cards are actually becoming more interesting to people. Just my 2 cents.
Okay, that's interesting. We kind of briefly talked about that in our last episode, I think, where we like the Pop Century, but the other cards are a little bit more to be desired. But everyone's got their opinion on Leaf. Yeah. Okay. What do you think the hobby will look like in 5 to 10 years?
Apparently everyone leaves their jobs and everyone's being sued. No, I think it's a really good question. I think what we're starting to see, and we saw bits and pieces of it over the past 2 years, and I think it's finally I feel more confident that we are seeing this direction, is a bit of a convergence between grading. I think is becoming commoditized in a lot of ways. I don't think we're going to see companies survive that are just remaining as graders. I think you're going to see this convergence now of grading with kind of the whole vaulting experience with kind of, it almost kind of gets, I don't want to say NFT experience, but kind of the digitization of the hobby, where I am grading a card and transacting, maybe trading that card. However, I don't actually have that card in my place. And
for sure. Yeah.
That, when you look at what's going on with Arena Club, with Tag, those companies, I think for people who are kind of scratching their heads of like, is this really a thing? Is it going to stick around? It seems like, my Instagram feed now, I feel like it's just full of their stuff at this point. And they seem to be gaining a lot of momentum at the national, and like I said, may just be the echo chamber I have on Instagram. However, it seems like with the changes we're now seeing, PSA starting to put a lot more emphasis on their mobile experience,
right, with
grade submission, with grade reveal. I always call it the GoPro business model, where people realized, hey, it was just a really cool, it was a really hardcore camera. It was more about the community and the content.
Yeah,
and I think we're starting to see that with grading is, hey, anyone can do grading, especially as technology takes a part of it. Now we're going to see how we can kind of weave it around with all these other, services and value adds.
Yeah, no, it makes sense to me. And what you said about digitizing the whole experience these days, it just makes more sense for, like, especially if you're more of an investor. I know that's another debate, investor versus collector, but if you're more of an investor, it just makes more sense to collect in that way, where you don't necessarily have to hold the cards. You just keep it safe in a vault somewhere.
I'd say it can be expensive. The transactions of the hobby are still expensive. And I don't mean from a monetary standpoint. I mean the act of actually finding a buyer to buy your card. And I think anything we can do to help with that, of making it, streamlining the process and making it easier to get liquidity for your cards. Because I'm with you. I mean, I just got this Iverson Rose Zero the other day.
Nice.
And I have it with me. I don't have everything with me, but I have this one. And I'm with you. I want to hold this. Like, I want to take videos with it. I want to do all kinds of things. But it's one of those things where not every card is going to be my PC card that I'm going to have with me and hold it. I want to look in the sun, stuff like that.
Exactly. Right.
So I think the hobby has to have a liquidity solution. And I think that's been a big problem over the past couple of years.
Yeah. Good point. Excellent point. All right. And the last question, any podcast listener will know that because we are a Canadian podcast, we always like to ask more of a Canadian-centric question. So you being a basketball card collector, who would you say is your favorite Toronto Raptor of all time?
Oh, I mean, well, before I just shout the name, I'm trying to think if there's anyone else who comes close. I mean, it has to be Vince Carter, right? I mean, is it Chris Bosh was there for a little bit, but I was trying to think who would be competing with Vince Carter.
You know, we got your Kyle Lowry's, you got Kawhi Leonard is the controversial choice, right?
Yeah. I just feel like it's Vince. It's got to be Vince.
Yeah.
He actually is one of the guys I've started picking up some of his stuff too. And I think his Hall of Fame vote is next year, right? As I recall.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I think I'm starting to kind of reappreciate his stuff. Just his video clips have started coming on my feed again, right. I guess, as we get closer to that next Hall of Fame. And just remarkable player. Just, I see a couple clips and I'm like, oh, I got to pick up his stuff now.
Yeah, highlight real dunks. And I think I've asked this question maybe 5 or 6 times to other basketball card collectors, and 90% I would say are just go to Vinsanity. So yeah, Vince Carter is running away with that informal poll.
I wanted to make sure I wasn't forgetting someone super obvious, but I was like, it has to be Vince.
Yeah, I agree. I have one of the SP, I think SP Authentic Vince Carter rookie cards numbered to 1250. Yeah, so that's a PC for me for sure.
Definitely keep that one. It's a great one.
Love it. All right, Mac, it's been a real pleasure chatting with you and about the hobby, and hopefully our paths will cross in person at a future card show. Never know, but this day and age, love always reaching out to other content creators in the hobby and sharing what you guys are doing. So keep it up, and love your videos.
Appreciate it. Thanks a lot, Clark.
Okay, thanks again to Mac. Really enjoyed connecting with him and learning about his card collection as well as his hobby journey. And I'll link his social media handle in the show notes below so you can start following him as well. Okay, so like I promised at the top of the show, let's move on now to our last segment today for this episode we call Quiz Show. And because I don't have any of my co-hosts with me today, I'm going to ask you, the listeners, a few quiz show questions. 3 to be exact, and I'll give out a prize, probably another blaster box to one lucky listener. I did say there were a couple of other rules, and one is that you have to be located in the US or Canada to be eligible. And the other is I'll select a winner a week after this episode airs by randomly selecting a qualified entrant with the most correct answers. All right? So if there are multiple people who answered all of them correctly, I'll select one from that group, kind of a random draw. And lastly, you can either send your answers by DMing us on Instagram at cardstothemoon, all one word, or you can email me at hello@fivecardguys.com. I'll put all the ways you can send us the answers in the show notes below. All right, you guys ready? Okay, question number 1. Out of the top 10 most expensive cards ever sold of active Dallas Cowboys players, one of the 10 is Dak Prescott, whose Gold Prism rookie card sold for about $44,000. All right? The other 9 are of just one player, believe it or not. So the question is, who is that player? Okay? Remember, active Dallas Cowboys players. Question number 2. The Justin Jefferson 2020 Panini Prism Black Finite 1-of-1 card sold for almost $58,000 recently, making him the second highest card sale for a wide receiver. Number 1 is, unsurprisingly, you might have guessed, Jerry Rice, whose 1997 Metal Universe PMG card sold for $150,000. And he's also had a bunch of others that sold for a lot of money. All right. Now, here's a question. Who is number 3 on that wide receiver list, not including all of the Jerry Rice cards and not including the recent Justin Jefferson 1-of-1? So really, who is the 3rd wide receiver on that list whose card sold for a significant amount of money? All right. Behind Jerry Rice and Justin Jefferson. Okay, last question. Just 3 questions for you. Topps just recently announced their Ultimate Collector experience with those who have the Green Refractor redemption card of Victor Wembanyama. And one of those holders will receive the specially inscribed card by Wemby. The question is, what was that inscription on the card when be signed. All right, pretty easy, yeah? Like I said, if there is more than one person who answers all of these questions correctly, I'll do a random draw and announce the winner shortly thereafter. And again, you can send your answers to our @CardsToTheMoon Instagram page and DM us there, or email me at hello@5cardguys.com. Again, all the details we'll have for you below in the show notes. So good luck, and that's it. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Cards to the Moon. We'll be back with a brand new episode next Tuesday. See you then. Bye. Hey, thanks for listening to Cards to the Moon. We'd really appreciate you subscribing to our podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. And you can also connect with each of us on Instagram at 5cardguys, or you can follow Hyung at Integrity Sports Cards, or John at TradeU@Recess. You can also check us out at 5cardguys.com. Thanks again, and hope to connect soon.